The Road to Rediscovery is sponsored by BetterHelp. Let me ask you something. Is there something interfering with your happiness or preventing you from achieving your goals? For me growing up, feelings of anxiety, inadequacy, doubt, and even imposter syndrome got in the way of me reaching my goals and reaching my full potential, right? So, BetterHelp addresses these and more. It's not a crisis line and it's not self help, it's professional therapy done securely online. BetterHelp will assess your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist. You can log into your account anytime and send a message to your therapist. You'll get timely and thoughtful responses, plus you can schedule weekly video or phone sessions so you won't have to ever sit in an uncomfortable waiting room as with traditional therapy. It's more affordable than traditional offline therapy, and get this, financial aid is even available. BetterHelp wants you to start living a happier life today. They mean it. Visit betterhelp.com/road to rediscovery. That's better, H-E-L-P, and join the over 1 million people taking charge of their mental health with the help of an experienced professional. And there's a special offer for our Road to Rediscovery listeners. Get 10% off your first month when you register at betterhelp.com/road to rediscovery. We're all on this journey of life together, and it sure feels good to know professional help is within our reach with BetterHelp. Again, that's better, H-E-L-P. Thanks to BetterHelp for sponsoring this podcast. Our lives are laid out on a road of bumps, turns, struggles, and more. How do we respond? How do we endure adversity for learning and growth? I'm Aubrey Johnson, and we'll explore these questions and more on the Road to Rediscovery. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Road to Rediscovery. I'm your host, Aubrey Johnson. The Road to Rediscovery is about reflecting on life lessons to learn and grow from them, and of course, pay it forward and uplift others who are struggling through dark times. Now, as you know, on the Road to Rediscovery, we are very passionate about delivering quality content for you and your personal growth. If you like what you hear, please visit roadtorediscovery.com/donate. That's road, the number 2, rediscovery.com/donate. We'll give you a shout out in a future episode. And as always, there is no obligation. We are truly, truly grateful for your listenership. My special guest is a single mom, attorney, business owner, and executive search professional. Having come from a life of prestige, life gave her, as she puts it, a hard kick in the tail, having survived sexual assault, 2 divorces, major debt, and more. As a result of her deep reflection, she's authored Blooming, Finding Gifts in the Shit of Life, and now thrives in helping others find their purpose through empowerment, shifting their mindset, reframing, and creating a vision for their lives. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Carrie Smith to the show. Hey, Carrie, welcome to the show. How are you?
Hi, and thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, no, absolutely. It's great to have you here for sure. So if we can just provide a little context, okay, for the benefit of the listeners, and if we can paint a picture, okay, can you start by give us a synopsis of how life was for you before the storm came, so to speak?
Huh. Do you want to start at the beginning? So, you know, um, growing up, I had a very difficult childhood.
Mm,
I grew up in a very super religious family where my father used religion to control us and as an excuse for bad behavior. Um, my family, my great great grandfather founded International Paper Company, and I had
mm,
another great great grandfather that had a seat on the New York Stock Exchange. So it was a family that, at one point in time, kind of lived the Great Gatsby lifestyle,
mm,
and but as the generations went on, the wealth didn't necessarily pass to all of us. So
mm,
in my little section of the family, my father was a doctor, and my mother married him thinking that she was going to be guaranteed financial stability, which was a big mistake. But the family was really high on expectations. They had expectations for us to go to the very, very best schools, and were very caught up in society and being members of and participating in the very highest levels of society.
Right.
And so when it got to me, I was the third of three. And because my parents were so religious, everything went to my brother, the firstborn male, and then to my sister, the firstborn female. And when it came to me, there just wasn't anything left. And to kind of draw this stark difference, in high school, my sister went to this school called Miss Porter's School in Farmington, Connecticut, which is a very, very exclusive all-girls school where some of the most, well-known, J.P. Morgan or whatnot, like send his kids. It's one of those really established old schools, boarding schools, where my grandmother, my mother, and my sister went. But while my sister was there and on the weekends flying on private jets and going to debutante balls, I was going to public school in Everett, Washington, which is a industrial seaside town where, while she's on a private plane, I'm in a vacant lot drinking beer.
Wow.
That's the difference. We're 18 months apart. And because they basically said, we're going to take care of the first two and you get the leftovers, which is nothing. That's the difference in how we were treated.
Oh my. My. Geez. So, while prestige was in your presence, you didn't seem to be a benefactor of it, it sounds.
No. In fact, it really caused an identity crisis for me because I felt like I should be behaving like and live up to the expectations of all of that, but I didn't have the financial resources to support that. And so I was very conflicted about, supposedly I'm from this high society family, but I can't afford to eat. It just didn't, it didn't make sense to me.
So what would you, or how would you explain your self-esteem at that time? I mean, that's a pretty hard hit to take. I mean, you weren't asked to be born the third out of three, and it almost seems like you're isolated, from these types of things. And but you seem to have surged on.
Well, it was a rough road. I mean, one of the chapters in my book is about family rejection. And because I came from this family, they were very into tennis, and they belonged to the clubs that had like grass courts, and it was all white. Tennis whites were required to play tennis there. And I, unfortunately, we discover throughout the process of my life that I had an eye injury, which means I have zero hand-eye coordination. There's a funny story in the book about how I got that injury. But what happened is I sucked hard at tennis. And because it was so important in my family, we had people that were like state champions and national squash champions and whatnot. I was resoundingly rejected. In fact, when my sister had her graduation party from Miss Porter's, we had this family get together where everybody was playing tennis. And my grandmother was screaming at me to get off the court because I was such an embarrassment. I couldn't play tennis. So here my sister is being honored and I am being vilified and rejected. And that just pretty much sums up my childhood, really. It took a lot to get out from under that and find my own way, carve my own path, and understand that rejection it can actually be a gift in that it released me from my family's expectations. Once I understood that rejection, I realized I didn't have to try to be like them because I wasn't like them. And I'd been rejected already. And that gave me freedom to really be who I was. And so I call rejection redirection. I think it's sometimes we feel so bad when we're rejected, but it actually can be a gift of God pointing us in a different direction.
Gotcha. That is beautiful. Rejection can be redirection.
Yeah.
And you were granted freedom from that rejection. And that takes, and we're going to touch on this in a minute on your book. But that takes a mind shift. It takes a way of reframing, right?
Yeah.
Because on the surface, you can easily receive that and feel victimized, feel, vilified, and so forth. And it takes some reframing to gain that new, fresh perspective. That's really more helpful than damaging, as is the former, right?
Yes, yes. In fact,
Yeah.
there's this great quote that I stumbled on when I was writing the book, and it's
Hmm.
rejection is the sand in the oyster that makes the pearl. I just was like,
So
oh, I
profound.
love that.
So profound.
Yeah. So little did they know that by rejecting me so fully, what a pearl did I turn into?
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. Man, that is awesome. So Carrie, most of your childhood consisted of this. And then let's fast forward to, you're an adult, and now of course comes real life adult problems, right?
Yeah.
Now when the first major struggle came your way, whichever it is, and you can share here whether it's the assault or the divorces, etc. Um, uh, did you feel that you were prepared for that at any point, or just
No,
wasn't ready?
no. I mean, one
Hmm.
of the things that I still deal with today
Hmm.
is because there was no support, or I always felt the sense of lack. And
Okay.
it wasn't just because I wasn't given, as much as far as, money or clothes or same level of education or any of that.
Hmm.
It was it was that those emotional needs of a parent showing up for you. And
Gotcha.
so as I hit those crises in life, and the other thing too is by being rejected by my family, I didn't have support throughout the family either. And so
Wow.
there really was no one for me.
Oh
And
my gosh.
again, we talk about reframing. It's so important. Is
Hmm.
I had to really turn inward, and well, we can talk about some of the things that happened, but it it's those internal resources where I learned and gained strength. Was I I just fought my way out of it,
Hmm.
and by looking at things differently, I mean, that really was something that helped. But so the first big event was when I was in college. I was sexually assaulted, and um, back in those days, people didn't talk about sexual assault, and somebody who was sexually assaulted was often blamed for it.
Right.
And so I wasn't able to talk about it, or I was told not to pursue charges or anything because I might get kicked out of my sorority.
Right.
But when I went home and I shared it with my mother, that's the most surprising story, I think, is I told her I'd been raped, and she said to me, she turned beet red and got angry and said, I am so disappointed in you.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, we had hoped you'd remain a virgin until you were married.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Jeez.
And you must never speak of this again. You must never tell your father. And like, you're
Mhm.
on your own. And that was it. That was the support I got.
Oh my. I am so sorry. Yeah, and your own parents, right? I
My own
mean,
parents. Yeah.
yeah.
And so for me, um, life has a way of kind of, these things happen. On the drive back from college before Thanksgiving, when I shared this with my mother, there was a
Mhm.
horrific accident that happened. And actually seeing this accident, I mean, right in front of me, seeing people that we knew pass away, um,
Oh no.
it really hit home for me that as depressed as I was about what had happened to me,
Mhm.
that I didn't want to die. I had been suicidal. I really was seriously considering killing myself, and then
Yeah.
come across this accident. And then, of course, I share this with my mother and get that response. But what happened is I actually was like, I had this moment of clarity that I didn't want to die, but I sure as hell wanted to get the hell out of Dodge. And so
Yes.
I realized that what I would do would be to transfer. And so I transferred from Washington State University to the University of Texas at Austin.
Mhm.
And Austin has been my home ever since. I mean, what a gift. I never would have ended up in Austin, Texas if I
Mhm.
hadn't
Mhm.
needed to get the hell out of town. And
Yes.
and And it was just, again, it was sort of serendipity. I had a sorority sister that had just come back from visiting. I didn't know a soul.
Yeah.
Just she'd been raving about how great the University of Texas was.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I literally, because of the timing, I was like, that's where I'm going to go. And here I am. Yeah.
And you haven't looked back since.
I haven't. I love it here. It's definitely my home.
Wow, that is awesome. And as a fellow Texan or Texan transplant, with myself living in North Dallas, I agree with you. Once I came here 7 years ago, hey, no looking back. I mean,
Yeah.
just really, really, enjoy it here. Enjoy the people. Enjoy the food. I'm a fan of the weather, so
Yes.
it's just all good stuff for sure. So, one thing you touched on, Carrie, that I found very profound and that I would love if you could maybe elaborate a little bit more for the benefit of the listeners, okay, is when going through those struggles, okay, um, and those challenges, you at some point realized that you had to look inward. You had to take an introspective approach to realizing what you needed to search for to be happy in life and to overcome these challenges.
Yeah.
If you can just speak on that a little bit, because I truly feel before you can look inward, you have to have some degree of self awareness. And just wanted to see if you can share or elaborate on how that went with you and your journey.
Yeah. Well, so I had this all bottled up inside of me, this trauma, and it was just
Hmm.
eating at me. And when I finally 6 years later sat down and I ended up sharing my story by writing it,
Yeah.
which I think is really key for a lot of people, because whenever I'd had a lot of experiences of trying to share different things where I felt minimized, like I couldn't tell my story or my experience.
Right.
And by writing it, there was no one else there. It was just me sharing my own experience. And when I shared that story with this guy I was kind of seeing,
Hmm.
and he showed empathy for me, that was the beginning of my healing journey.
Hmm.
And so I got into therapy and all of that. But along the way, I stumbled across a couple different things that were really, really helpful to me. And let me say, so I don't forget to go back to them. But one
Yeah.
is the book, The Gift of Fear by Gavin de Becker. And
Hmm.
another is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And both of those kind of lean towards this idea of going inward. So with Gavin de Becker's book, I mean, he talks about rape in his opening story, and he talks about survival signals that you can learn to recognize to help avoid that kind of thing happening to you. But what I love about his book and about his story in general is that he wrote this book because he had become one of the foremost experts on the ability to predict violence. And the way he became that expert was because he'd had an incredibly violent childhood.
Hmm.
And so
Okay.
instead of burying his childhood trauma, he instead embraced it and recognized it as being part of the fabric of who he was,
Yes.
and used it to propel him to greatness. And he created this company advising VIPs, CEOs, even the president of the United States
Hmm.
on whether somebody had the propensity to be violent or not. And so looking at him as an example, I then started kind of doing some more exploring on that. And I found this book by Augustine Burroughs called This Is How. And in that book, he talks about how, as horrible and horrific as something like rape is, you don't have to let it continue to be a drain on you. You
Right.
can instead claim it and understand that what happened to you is actually something that it becomes part of you. And if you're able to reframe the experience and look at it differently, then you can meld it into something that is beautiful and useful and can be used to propel you forward as opposed to drain you.
Right.
So fast forward to Viktor Frankl's book, because Viktor Frankl, as many may know, is a Holocaust survivor. And his book talked about his experiences in
Hmm.
And here he is in the middle of a concentration camp, with his friends and relatives being sent to the gas chambers and beaten on a regular basis, being starved.
Mm,
And yet he's able to find empathy for his guard and actually reach a place of peace. Um, and the reason for that is because he turned inward. And what he talks about is the fact that, as horrible as things are that happen to you, you never give up control of how you choose to view an event and the story that you tell yourself.
right.
And so when he was able to move beyond what was happening to him and look outward and try to understand why his guard was doing what he was doing, he was able to find empathy and, realize that the story he told himself was going to determine and whether or not he survived this experience. And so, both of these books or three books and stories all involve um, taking what's happening to you and reframing it and viewing it differently so that you can use it as something to move you forward as opposed to something that drains you.
I see. I see. Um, Man, that's beautiful. And so the empathy that you felt from your friend, after him reviewing what you've written, as well as the three books, would you say that those were key elements that kind of helped you endure and overcome throughout these struggles?
Well, that, yes, and lots of therapy. Let's be honest. I
Right,
mean,
and therapy, right?
one of the things I really want people to understand
Hmm.
is, because when we talk about reframing, it's a lot about thinking about things positively, and I'm very very careful about toxic positivity and all of that. I
Yes,
think it's really important for people to understand that part of my healing journey was acknowledging what happened to me and owning it and actually claiming it, not shoving it under the rug, and then
right,
fully experiencing all of the emotions that go along with that, from rage to grief, whatever it is that you need to move through. But you have to feel those emotions and work through them in order to get to the other side and to heal. And for me, I like to say you have to reach rage to reach forgiveness, because in order to release that anger, you have to really understand and embrace, like, I'm pissed that this person did this to me. But then
right, right,
go, okay, let go of that. I mean,
right.
it's, you have a choice. Am I going to stay in that space and mire in the mud and let this event define me for the rest of my life? Or am I going to take what happened to me and see what good I can pull from it? And for me, I realized later, people would tell me that I had a quiet confidence and that I had a presence. I would walk into a room and I had a presence.
Hmm.
I realized that was because I was a survivor. I knew, like, when I walk in a room, I'm like, I know I'm going to get out of here alive. Like, I
Right.
know. Yeah. I mean, so there is something to that. And so the quiet confidence and the emotional resilience that I gained, learning, I think when you have trauma, you have to discover other skills to get out of it, whether it's creativity or innovation or, you know, different survival skills, intuition. There's other things that come from these experiences that are good. And if we can focus on those and claim those, it makes all the difference.
No, it truly does. I couldn't agree more, 110%. And I'm really, really grateful that you express the point of having to process through these emotions when something traumatic happens. This is something that we've talked about on the show for a long time. When there's bumps in the road, when there's struggle, have to lean into them and not shove them under the rug, right? You must lean into these, you must embrace them close. It's kind of like I'm kind of a movie buff and I hate to quote movie quotes normally, but actually, no, I don't. I do. But one of the quotes is by the Godfather, in the movie. He said, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. And so, just leaning into and embracing, you know, um, the issue, the problem, the struggles, to me, that helps us see it for what it is. It's hard to overcome or find a resolution to something that we avoid, right?
Oh, yeah, big time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're better positioned if we acknowledge what it is we want to resolve, and you pointed that out very very clearly, Carrie. So I want to thank you for that for sure.
Yeah. And one of my other favorite books, clearly I like to read, um, is Ryan Holiday, The Obstacle is the Way. I love that book. It's one of the other things I like to say is that mindset is a muscle. And as we learn these reframing skills, we kind of shift our mindset. And the more you flex a muscle, the stronger it gets, right? So
Yes,
with
yes.
have gotten to the place where I've been through enough trauma and learned to view it differently and find the good in it, that now when an obstacle comes up, I kind of get excited. I kind of look at it like it's a puzzle. And that sounds weird. But for instance, like when the pandemic hit, I was like, okay, this is one of those once in a generation events when innovation happens. People make fortunes, make and lose fortunes. It's a big event, and recognizing it for what it was, I was like, okay, what am I going to get out of this? And also, when we had that, lockdown, it was a forced sabbatical. I'm like, well, what am I going to do at this time? Am I going to sit here and eat bonbons, or am I going to use this time? I'm going to write a book. I wrote a book. So it's about when you flex that muscle and you view things differently, then when these obstacles come up, you're able to immediately move from the pain to the opportunity. I mean, so much more quickly.
The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan
Holiday.
Holiday. Thank you.
Yes, he's written a number of good books, but that's my favorite.
Very nice. And you know what? To me, that title tells it all, right? The obstacle is the way. Because no one's going to have an obstacle-free life, right?
Mm,
Yeah, our journey is, we'll have turns and bumps and ripples and even flooding. Just um, big trees knocking, blocking your way and path and everything. So the obstacle is the way. I
it
like
is.
that.
And as I like to say,
Hmm.
life is just one big roller coaster ride. And we have
Yeah.
a choice. We can scream in terror the
Hmm.
entire way, or we can throw our hands up and enjoy it,
Yes. Yes.
right?
Yeah. And there's and that takes me to the title, okay, of your book that I want to chat about quickly. But before that, I wanted to just I don't know. I just wanted to say, um, you've raised up a lot of good points when you were talking about the books and the obstacles, and I I I mean, have you learned what have you learned about yourself, in this journey in retrospect?
Well, I know that I'm not just a survivor, I'm a thriver.
100%.
And when stuff comes, I mean, I am somebody that I think on my feet. I'm scrappy. I do not. I don't get anxious,
Hmm.
and I don't worry. I have a lot of self confidence that about being able to get through things, and it's because I have lived through so many things, and so I've
Right.
come to realize that I have the skills, and as long as God continues to bless me to be on this planet, I'm still here. So I don't really sweat it.
Oh, that's great, man. That's awesome. um, Thank you for sharing that. That's a true revelation, in all that you've gone through. Just being relaxed about things, taking things as they come, welcoming challenges, and not getting too flustered, right? Another thing, I'm sorry, and then we're going to get to the title. Another thing I wanted to kind of briefly just share my appreciation for you discussing, okay, is power. Okay, we all have power, I feel. And you mentioned something, especially after talking about the gentleman who was at Auschwitz.
Yeah,
um, the power to respond in a way that is helpful and healthy to yourself, no matter the circumstances. Of course, there's a process. You can be angry, you can be upset, pissed off, sad, whatever, and you go through that process. But it's us having the power to go through the process, so that we can have empathy for that guard in his case, or be able to forgive, and having that power, to me, that's more powerful than just responding, at a hair trigger, and not thinking before you speak or act, and then of course have a lifelong, years of a resentment for what
Yeah.
happened without
Yeah.
processing it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think when we have things happen to us and these things are truly horrific, like being in a concentration camp or being
Yeah.
raped or,
Hmm.
having a family member, murdered or something,
Yeah.
people say, how can you possibly find anything good in that? Like, that's just, game over. I'm like,
Hmm.
okay, well, that game over is your choice, right? You're
Right.
choosing that. But the way I look at it is when we're feeling like we're a victim, we're focused on somebody doing something to us. And
Hmm.
in that way of thinking, you are giving up all of your power. You are
Yes.
powerless. But the
Yes.
minute you switch your way of thinking to, I'm in control here and they can do whatever they want to me, but they never get to own what's going on inside of me. And I'm at peace
Hmm.
and I'm instead going to, look at them and try to find compassion for them or understanding. And
Yes.
one of the things that Viktor Frankl talks about is that he actually came to a place where he pitied his guards. And
Mm-hmm.
wow, as I like to say, there is real power in pity. In that if something is
Yes.
happening to you and this aggressor, whatever the experience is happening, if you can get to a place where you pity that person, you
Hmm.
you're released from their grasp.
Oh
Suddenly,
yeah.
nobody wants to feel pitied. But if you
Right.
get to that place, you have so much power. And so it's that whole shift in mindset. If someone is raping me, I mean, yeah, I pity him. Like, why is he
Yeah.
doing that? Like, he can't,
Yeah.
whatever the reason is. I feel pity for him,
Yeah.
and that's
Yeah.
really powerful.
Yeah, it's extremely powerful, right? I mean, the you're not giving up your power. And like you said, the gentleman who was in the concentration camps, right? Pity for the guard when your own life hangs in their balance, right?
Yeah, yeah.
That's a significant mind shift. It's a
Oh yeah.
significant reframing, and of course, uh, it allows us to realize the power that we have, and one of the biggest phrases that kind of gets under my skin, I'm afraid to say, is and you've probably heard this phrase before. A lot of people say it in arguments and everything. It's when they say, "I'm done. I'm done."
Yeah.
You know, well, I'm thinking to myself, really? I mean, is I'm done? Really? Is that really the case? Are you done? So you've given up your power to someone or whatever the source is that made you quote done, to where it's that final. Is it really that final? Because if you are done, as life has proven historically, something else is always going to come up. So,
Right.
what are you going to do now when this other challenge comes up and you're already done? That's a lot of power that you've given up. If you're done, that means you can't do anything to respond to this next adversity because in life it will happen. So, when people throw around that phrase, I'm done, it kind of, I don't know, it kind of gets to me and makes me think, are you really done? And
Well, there's
what
two
if,
ways to look at that term. I mean, the other way to
yeah,
look at it is when somebody says that, you know, and I can speak to this being twice divorced, and that is when when somebody is angry at you, they are still engaged with you.
yeah,
They're
that's right.
still feeling an emotion towards you. So if they're, but the minute somebody moves from anger to apathy,
Yes.
that is when it's truly over.
Yes.
And I think a lot of times when you say that phrase, when I think of I'm done, I'm thinking, well, I just moved from anger to apathy. So it's
Okay.
it's a way to exit that
Yeah.
experience, relationship, whatever it is. It's literally saying I am disengaging.
Yes.
So there are two different ways to look at that. I appreciate where you're coming from, but that's something else to kind of think about.
Well, I appreciate you offering that additional perspective because that is very much so true. And like again, I was in a previous marriage, so I know when I was quote done, I've had it
Yeah.
pretty much, and so it is that disengaging, and sometimes we have to do that for our own good, right? Now that doesn't mean that we're done with everything in life, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah, yeah.
It just means that you're disengaging from that, whatever that
Yes.
is. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, some great insights, Carrie. I really appreciate all this you're sharing for the benefit of the listeners. I really do. So I want to talk quickly about your title. Okay.
Yes.
Your title, Blooming, Finding Gifts in the Shit of Life. Um, to me, and I could be wrong, but to me, it suggests finding that quote silver lining, right? And I think we've talked about this earlier. Um, in a lot for a lot of us, right? We have to go through a mind shift or a reframing or learn how to do it in order to find those gifts and silver lining. It's
Well,
so
so
mhm,
let me just interject here, and that
uh-huh.
is the use of the word shit is very intentional because it's a double entendre. And that means
Okay.
that not only is it like colloquially, we refer to all of our bad experiences as,
Yeah.
the shit in our lives or my life's gone to shit or whatever.
Yeah.
But shit is quite literally fertilizer. And it's in the shit. We need the shit. It's the shit that makes
Yes.
us grow and bloom. And
Right.
if we didn't have those experiences, we wouldn't grow and bloom into our greatness.
Just like the rain. Just like the rain.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, but another reference because I love the show Seinfeld. George says "ma newer" is a good thing because of ma in newer. Again, ma because your mother ma, and then newer because when something's new or newer, it's newer is good.
Yeah.
I don't know where he was going with it, but it kind of reminded me of that, and I appreciate you spelling out that double entendre, right? Because um, eh, we do need shit in our lives because it does help us grow.
We need it. I mean, it's
Yeah.
essential. If you think about the fact that you need fertilizer,
Hmm.
quite literally, for a flower to bloom, if you embrace that understanding, you learn that all these difficult life experiences are actually the things that shape us into who we are.
Yeah.
And that's where we get some great life skills, and it hones us into being the special snowflake that we are. um, our uniqueness, what we have to offer everyone, the benefit. You're thanking me for all these pieces of wisdom. Well, it's because I've been through so much.
Right.
That's where I gained that wisdom from. So that's why I
Hmm.
laugh about it, because it's like, well, I hope other people benefit from my life experiences, and perhaps they, you know, can avoid some of the pitfalls or life experiences or difficulties that I went through. But on the other hand, it's those life experiences that make us better. So,
Yeah. They do totally make us better, and if someone if there's anyone out there who has heard the insights that you've shared, and we did not necessarily prevent them from making whatever mistakes or whatever encounters, because they're already in it, at least they know they're not alone, right?
yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
I think it's so important. I mean, if there's one thing in my message that's so important is I'm trying to give people the power so they
Yes.
understand, to remove that victim label and to figure out from this podcast and from perhaps reading the book
Hmm.
that there is a path to using the very worst experiences of your life and to turn them into your greatest strengths and to use them to propel you to greatness as opposed to drain you.
The irony that I find in this, Carrie, I have to say, when someone take takes the victim perspective of something happening to them, there's a sense or feeling of vulnerability that they have. They feel weak because they've been a victim and they were overpowered by some event or some person, right?
Right.
But ironically, vulnerability, as you've shared on this show, in being vulnerable can also be powerful because
Hugely
you
powerful.
yes, because you are opening up yourself and your vulnerability for the purpose of helping other people grow.
Yeah. Well, so that has been a long journey for me because I spent most of my
Mhm.
life trying to fit in and be like everybody else
Yeah.
and keep everybody else happy. And when you actually are authentic and show all your warts,
Yes.
you your differences are pretty glaring, and you've exposed yourself. It can be a raw experience. But what I have learned from my experience is that people who are judgmental, people who pretend to be perfect, are often the most judgmental.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
people with judgment of others or looking down on someone and finding the differences, judgment causes separation, whereas
Mm,
authenticity and vulnerability create connection.
mm.
And so one of the gifts that has come out of this pandemic is really the Zoom call, and that is all of a sudden we can see into people's lives and see how they authentically live and
Yes.
realize, oh my God, I mean, I was on a Zoom call with the VP of a Fortune 500 company, and her 2-year-old was potty training in the background.
Mm.
you know, that's
Yeah,
life. I mean,
yeah.
and I was like, I just thought it was the cutest thing. I thought it was hysterical. But um, I think that one of the beautiful things that has come out of the pandemic is, as I like to say, the professional and the personal personas have merged.
Yes.
And now we really are getting to have a more authentic view of people's whole lives as opposed to just this professional persona that they've put out there. And in some ways, that has led to greater connection. And I hope that we kind of stay in that authenticity space, because the more authentic people are, when you think about the books you want to read or the people you want to meet, it's because, oh, they get me. I relate to them. And the reason you relate to them is because they've been vulnerable and authentic and shared something that you maybe have kept privately, but now you realize you're not the only one.
Nope, that's true. You're not the only one.
Yeah.
And another piece of irony I want to share in just what you said there regarding the pandemic and so forth is, you know, it's ironic through a virtual platform that we have seen authenticity and uh, we all have been humanized. Right? I mean,
Yeah.
if you talk to a VP in a Fortune 500 company in, let's say, an office setting or environment, corporate environment, you have this persona that is there, right? The suit, the talk, the environment, right? But in a Zoom at each other's homes, it humanizes us, right? And the potty training
Absolutely.
in the background.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
love
So
it.
true.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Carrie. And I want to ask you as we get close to wrapping up here, if you can sum it up in one sentence, okay? What is Carrie Smith's road to rediscovery?
Well, clearly it's been a bumpy one. But that's a good thing. I've learned to enjoy the ride.
Hmm, hmm.
It's been a journey of of learning of um, learning to own my traumas
Yeah.
and difficulties and failures, embrace
Mhm.
them, reframe them, and use them to power me forward.
Beautiful, beautiful. So, Carrie, how can the listeners connect with you, learn more about your great work, and pick up a copy of your book?
Yeah. So my personal website is carrington-smith.com. And if you go to that website, you can download the first chapter of the book for free. Of course, the book is Blooming Finding Gifts in the Shit of Life by Carrington Smith. It's available on Amazon. It's also available on Audible if you prefer to listen to it. And I did record it. And then,
Awesome.
yeah, My professional website is carringtonlegal.com. And then, of course, you can find me on social at CarringtonATX on any of the social.
Okay. ATX. All
For
right.
Austin, Texas.
Austin, Texas. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Texas represent. And we're going to make sure that we have links to those in the episode show notes so the listeners can click on the links and learn more about your work, connect with you, maybe follow you, pick up a copy of your book as they're listening to this awesome conversation. Oh, Carrie, it's been so great having you on the show. I really appreciate all sorts of anecdotes that you have shared with the listeners, and I have no doubt, there's something you shared that has resonated with the listeners that they will take to heart and transform. So thanks so much for coming on the show, Carrie.
Oh, thanks for having me. This has been great. I've really enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you. Likewise, for sure. And I want to thank all of you for tuning in and listening. And look, if you have a loved one, a close friend or a colleague or coworker who just doesn't seem to be themselves, they're going through dark days of despair, maybe holding on to addictions or bad habits or behaviors that is quite unlike them, not quite sure where to turn to or where to go, I humbly ask that you please share this show with them, because on the road to rediscovery, we want our listeners to know two things. Number one, you're not alone. And number two, there is always hope. The road to rediscovery, it's a movement, a revolution. And guess what? You are now part of it. We're all roadies on this journey of life, and it sure feels good having you on the road with me. Thank you for listening. We'll chat again soon. We really hope you enjoyed this episode of The Road to Rediscovery. We'd love to hear from you. Shoot us an email at roadtorediscoverypodcast@gmail.com and leave us any questions or comments you may have. The Road to Rediscovery is an AJ Shark production.